Well, hello and welcome everyone to the Integrate Professional Development webinar series. The Integrate project aims to promote faculty teaching about the Earth in the context of society. Integrate is an NSF-funded STEM talent expansion project. Its two overarching goals are first, to develop materials and curricula that are adoptable and adaptable for faculty to increase Earth literacy for all undergraduates. And second, to increase majors in the geosciences and related fields to develop a workforce capable of tackling environmental and resource challenges. This webinar is part of a series supporting teaching with Integrate principles using the piloted and peer-reviewed Integrate developed and curated materials as tools. The webinars this semester emphasize solutions to challenges of interdisciplinary teaching and learning and to interdisciplinary Earth, environmental, and sustainability programs. They are a partnership between the National Association of Geoscience Teachers and the Association for Environmental Studies and Sciences, a professional society for interdisciplinary faculty and students. On the screen and in the chat box, there is a link to the webinar event page where you can find the presentation slides, resources related to the presentation, and afterwards, a recording of the webinar. If you have questions along the way, you can type them into the chat box. To access that, find the Zoom control bar and click on chat. We ask that you leave your mics muted and video off, which will help us get a good recording of today's webinar. And now I'll turn it over to David Blockstein, who will be introducing our speakers today.
Thank you very much, Mitchell. So I'm David Blockstein. I'm a senior advisor to ACE, as we call it, the Association for Environmental Studies and Sciences, and I'm also a member of the project leadership team for Integrate, so the group that's brought the webinar together. So I'm really delighted to have two great speakers today to look at this question of the changing world of higher education, what that means for the Earth and environmental programs, and how programs and departments can not only survive but even thrive. I will say thank you for the over 100 people who registered and put down your issues as to why you're interested in the webinar. And each situation is a little bit different, but it's clear that we're facing a situation where a lot of programs are doing less well than they would like to be in terms of their position in the university, the number of students, things of that nature. And so there's a lot of, you're not alone in your situation. And so what we hope to do today is to help to give you the context of the changing world of higher education, and also some strategies for ways to deal with that changing world and take advantage of that changing world. And then we'll also talk about things like the NAGT traveling workshop program that would be tools that you might employ to help to follow up and to improve your program. So without further ado, our two presenters today, first is Stephen Mulkey, who is affiliate faculty at the University of Florida, Gainesville, in their Department of Biology, where he teaches courses about global change and sustainability. Stephen also is the president emeritus of Unity College, a small college in Maine, where he had the opportunity to really see firsthand the changing world of higher education from that perch. And then Kathy Brown, who is the chairperson of the Department of Geological, Environmental, and Marine Sciences at Rutgers University, a relatively small university in New Jersey. And Kathy will recount some of the strategies that her department has used to thrive after experiencing a big challenge to the future existence of that department. So without further ado, I'll turn it to Stephen. And I should also just reinforce Mitchell that please do use the chat function to ask questions, to share your strategies, to share your stories, and then we'll After each presentation, we'll turn to the comments in the chat function and try to address them as best we can. So thank you, and go ahead, Stephen.
Terrific. I'm delighted to be here. Can everybody see my screen? Okay, yeah. We're good. I was always struck by this quote by Wickman and Rockstrom about where they stated, the way we've structured research and organized universities is not consistent with how reality works. The sciences and universities are stuck in the disciplinary status quo they have been in for centuries. Well, indeed, there has been significant progress made in disrupting this disciplinary status quo. Places like the Nicholas Institute, the Bren School, there are several other excellent examples, but most public universities are still operating on the old model that we've had for a very, very long time. What I'd like to present to you today is the notion that there is not only urgency, but I believe a real opportunity for a renewed mission for higher education. The mission of higher education, as I define it, is the overarching mission, regardless of what kind of graduates you think you're turning out, is the maintenance and renewal of civilization. To that end, sustainability is crucial. This is the defining era for our species. There can be no question about that, and I believe for higher education. It's urgent. We produce practitioners able to integrate knowledge from multiple disciplines and understand the trade-offs among those solutions. A very tall order for students, undergraduates coming into the university today with a fairly narrow perspective on what kind of disciplines they might actually participate in. Higher education has an ethical obligation to lead the development of the foundation of a sustainable civilization. Integration of environmental and sustainability programming across the curriculum has been extremely problematic. There are over 2,000 interdisciplinary environmental programs in the US and Canada, and these programs have mostly failed to produce the holistic practitioners we need because, first, the academic silos and budgetary process limit the development of integrated curricula, and two, many lack the autonomy and have unsustainable funding. Recently worked with Shirley Vincent and others to produce an analysis, Shirley producing most of the data. And the bottom line, when you look at the various ways these different units are created and housed, is that many, arguably most, lack autonomy and equal status with the traditional disciplinary units. There are a number of things happening, what I call the political economy of higher education, that I think are extremely disturbing. And I think we need to enumerate just a few of them. Higher education is no longer funded as a public trust. However, public universities are in fact regulated by the state legislatures and the governors, although they're not funded as part of the public trust. Most public universities are now mostly funded from tuition. Institutions and their services are increasingly privatized, commercialized, and run like corporations. Analytics and marketing are used to manage the shared reality of the groups within and external to the university. Using such tools, students are managed as consumers and their tuition and loans as financial assets valuable for the lenders. But more importantly, those loans are valuable to the universities, a condition that I consider to be unethical. Access to government funding for science and the humanities will continue to decline, certainly on a per capita basis. Maintaining independent research and academic freedom is problematic. Public universities are increasingly dependent on corporate partnerships, revenues from intellectual property, non-academic activities, and philanthropy. Nothing really wrong with that, so long as it's applied appropriately. And one of the most disturbing things is that investments are often not transparent and they are burdened with moral hazards, such as investments in fossil fuels. Universities have become focused on training students for specific markets and corporate needs, and I think many of us have experienced that the baccalaureate is becoming a commodity. Student demographies are shifting. Things are about to change rather dramatically, and enrollments in many institutions are uncertain and unstable. The northern tier of the U.S. has several institutions that are struggling, and have declining freshman enrollments. University of Wisconsin, as Stevens Point is a case study in that. Um, by 2025, students of color will comprise a majority of the high school graduates, and soon after 2030, they will be the majority on many college campuses. Students of color are more likely to be first-generation matriculates and come from families with limited means. We need to ethically examine the viability of the student loan process for those students and all students. I like the idea of there being planetary boundaries, but the particular version of it that I think makes the most sense is the one from Kate Rayworth, where she and the folks at Oxfam have put forward this environmental ceiling. Most of us on this webinar are familiar with what that is. But she makes the point that the social foundation is absolutely crucial. Income, education, voice, energy, jobs, social equity, gender equity, and health. I think what we face is a confluence of crises in higher education. And the point of the remaining slides of my part of the talk are that, one, we must accelerate the investment in the mission of higher education to build a sustainable civilization. And secondly, higher education is undergoing massive transformation driven by financing and student demography. One approach to this has been sustainability science, as articulated by the U.S. National Academy. It's education and research that seeks to understand the complexity of the interactions among economy, society, and nature in order to propose concrete solutions to complex problems threatening the survival of humanity. Sustainability science is really knowledge for mitigation, adaptation, and resilience, and it is discipline spanning in the extreme. It's endorsed by the U.S. National Academy of Science and National Science Foundation and the AAAS. You can see good examples of it at the Arizona State University, although imperfect examples. And Unity College in 2012 adopted as sustainability science as the framework for all of its programming, including the liberal arts and the humanities. It's a form of disciplinary convergence. The term transdisciplinary has been used. I prefer the term disciplinary convergence. If we look at the interdisciplinary model, typically what we do is bring experts together to solve a problem. It's very laborious, very time consuming, and definitions for simple words like models need to be debated. Disciplinary convergence is where you put the practitioner through a program that actually uses sustainability science as its core and brings all of the disciplines into the curriculum. Convergence is a comprehensive synthetic framework for addressing complex problems. It's characterized by deep integration across disciplines driven by a compelling problem. I'd like to outline what I think are some realistic expectations for change in higher education. I remember when I helped develop my first program at the University of Missouri at St. Louis, the International Center for Tropical Ecology, we were going to rock the world. I was soon disillusioned of that. And some of these are the reasons that we need to think carefully about how to move forward. Change in public higher education is overburdened with codependence. It is at best incremental. Everything is interlinked, and it's extremely difficult to change one part of the system without affecting all other parts of the system. Attempts at systemic change in established public institutions mostly fail, and the track record speaks for itself on this. For public institutions, the fiduciary is not your board. It is the governor and the legislature. They are the ones that ultimately have both the financial and ethical responsibility for the institution. The executive VPs and deans hold most of the authority. Do not circumvent the chain of command in your reform efforts. It is the worst possible thing you can do. I have learned that through sad experience, as have many of my colleagues. To a lesser or greater degree, whether you like it or not, your program will be assessed on the basis of return on investment. So you best get pointed up on what that means and how to manage that concept. Vested academic interests can be extremely resistant to curriculum reform. Don't go through them, work around them. Financial mismanagement, unethical personal conduct by faculty, and misconduct of research have made all programs vulnerable to administrative oversight and intervention. So what would success look like? What are the components of successful convergent disciplinary programs? Formally committed and compensated interdisciplinary faculty. Defined tenure and promotion for interdisciplinary scholarship. It is astonishing to me the number of institutions that have interdisciplinary units yet have failed to define tenure and promotion for those faculty. Instructors are treated as full citizens of the department. Interdisciplinary programs are fully integrated with institutional structure and decision-making. Dedicated and autonomous infrastructure and leadership, key support staff are permanent. Outreach is recognized and compensated. It's critically important that we engage the external community. Interdisciplinary curricula that is holistic and integrated, both within a course and across courses. Humanities and social sciences should play a major role in the integration. Interdepartment and intercollegiate college courses in essential skills and emerging areas. Securely funded intramural grants programs. Which lead, in my experience at two public funded institutions, to strong extramural grants support. University advancement and development treats the program as a valued asset rather than an afterthought. It has strong branding and marketing, including dedicated programs to increase diversity. Characteristics of dysfunctional programs, no surprise, are much the opposite. Lacks secure status and funding within the university, treated as an afterthought, funded on the margins. Lack guidelines for tenure and promotion of interdisciplinary faculty. The hiring and funding of new faculty dominated by the traditional disciplines, that because that's where they get their faculty on loan. Weak and intramural grants programs, poor extramural grant support, weak or no donor base. Faculty are committed to traditional programs as their first mode of service and lack the time and resources to commit to the interdisciplinary unit spanning programs. These units lack effective marketing and branding, weak student recruitment. Curricula are a smorgasbord of existing courses without interdisciplinary synthesis. Curricula lack clear learning outcomes distinct from the other programs. Lack of clarity and agreement of what constitutes interdisciplinary research. Program staffed by non-tenure track faculty that are not full citizens of their departments with heavy teaching loads. Inadequate support staff or insecure support staff that come and go. Lack of community and infrastructure. Programs are often housed in existing disciplinary departments or within colleges dominated by disciplinary agendas. And there's a lack of dedicated programs for increasing diversity of faculty and students. I have experienced all of these things at both the University of Florida and at the University of Idaho. Strategic elements for interdisciplinary programs. Here are some proactive elements for adaptation. Make your program indispensable for the university and its stakeholders. This requires vision and a lot of work and a lot of coordination, and everybody needs to be on board. Total transparency is the order of the day. Establish clarity of purpose and explicit realistic goals for success. Define and codify the concepts of interdisciplinarity and sustainability. Define the academic community for the program, including the arts, humanities, and social sciences. These are not second-class citizens. They are foundational and integrative to the entire program. Develop a flexible matrix of courses and include a template for essential elements of core interdisciplinary courses. Establish approved guidelines for tenure and promotion of interdisciplinary scholars. Define the role of instructors and minimize the use of adjuncts. Become known to the executive administration as an asset. Use data. Demonstrate the return on investment value of your program. Most environmental interdisciplinary programs can do this hands down, but many have not tried. Build an identity that extends beyond the campus and supports your regional and state communities with science-based guidance. That's part of what makes you valuable to stakeholders externally. Other elements: recruit and support faculty leadership and key faculty from existing programs and departments. Planning and isolation guarantees failure and ensures conflict. Develop a detailed plan for branding and marketing. Academics are notoriously terrible at this. I developed an instinct for it at the University of Missouri St. Louis and at the University of Idaho, and then again at Unity. I hired external marketing and branding firms to promote our programming. It works. It's really important to do this. It's really important to find the money to do this. The program must be differentiated from existing programs. Identify and target your markets. Identify sources of funding and develop clear guidelines for allocation of resources. Acquire formal administration agreement on allocation of indirect costs. If you're housed within a typical disciplinary-based college or department, you need a formal agreement from the Vice President of Research as to how your interdisciplinary scholars' grants and their indirect costs will be allocated. Don't leave it up to the whims of the department you're in and the vice president. Insist that the university advancement and development give your program its fair share of donor development. Often you are treated as an afterthought or not thought of at all. Institutionalize frequent and effective publicity emphasizing the collaborative nature of research and teaching and impacts on stakeholders. This is institutionalized. This is internal marketing and branding. Collect ongoing data for recruitment, graduation grades, student debt, grant support, tuition revenue, student service from other units. This helps with your return on investment argument. Create a strong external advisory board populated by key stakeholders and advocates. So you've done all this and you've failed. And the vice presidents have come to you and said, I'm sorry, but we can no longer afford this interdisciplinary environmental and sustainability program. It's not bringing us in the students. It's not bringing us in the bucks. So what do? Make a strong written response with realistic alternative to the proposed cuts and restructuring. A lot of this was done at Stevens Point, University of Wisconsin at Stevens Point. Make sure your response is realistic in the context of the proposed cuts and the rationale for those proposed cuts. Administrations often respond to a strong community response, both internal and external communities. Organize your academic and stakeholder community. Use your advisory board. Base your arguments on money and data. Include public relations aspects to your response. Consider writing op-eds. Include frank discussion in your newsletter and other media. Engage social media. You can do so perhaps carefully depending on what the rules are in your department at a public university. Recruit alumni and major employers in your response. Make personal contact with any major donors and ask them to weigh in. If downsizing is unavoidable, develop explicit plans to preserve the critical elements of the program. Planning must be a community effort and it must be transparent. Identify and facilitate those aspects of restructuring likely to benefit the development of integrated programming. All cuts and all downsizing is not destructive. Some of it is constructive. Identify those elements that could benefit the integrative programming that is so important. Assist faculty and staff in finding new placements. Assist students in finding comparable programs at other universities. Sadly, I've been faced with that task at both the University of Florida and the University of Idaho. And with that, I'll turn it over to my collaborators and colleagues. Thank you for listening.
Well, that was quite the tale there, Stephen. Thank you. I think that both sobering, but also providing opportunities for thinking and for acting. Does anybody have any specific questions or comments for Stephen? We're going to keep you all muted. So if you do, please type them in the chat function now. Otherwise, we'll go ahead to Kathy's presentation. And you can see Stephen's contact information at the bottom, or for those of you who can't see the screen, it's smulkey, MULKEY, at ufl.edu. And knowing Stephen, he'll be glad to to follow up with people individually.
Happy to respond.
Yeah, so I think we will provide, yes, a recording, and then also the website for this webinar will also have links to the slides. So yeah, I think that was the main question and comment, that people appreciated it and want to get access to the slides, and I was thinking the same thing. So if there's specific questions or comments, we can follow up after Kathy's talk. So let me, you've had the big picture now with Stephen, and so now we have the case study of the GEMS program at Rider University, and I'll turn to Kathy Brown to share that experience with us. And you can just go ahead and share your screen now, Kathy.
Okay, will do. Just give me 1 second.
And feel free, everyone else, to keep adding comments or questions on the chat, or if you have things from your experience that you want to do. And your slides, your first slide is up, Kathy, so take it away, please. Thank you.
Great. Well, it's great to be with all of you. It was quite interesting to take a look at your comments about why you've joined. Hopefully, a combination of ideas here today will be helpful. So I am here to offer a small single case study. I'm happy to say that we're on sort of the better side of that case study, but we're early in our responses. So first I should give you some context about my department and where it fits into my institution. So Rider University is a small private liberal arts college that provides mostly undergraduate programs for both arts and sciences and for professional certifications and careers. We do have some graduate programs, though none of those are in the natural sciences. We're pretty small, and while we are increasingly attracting students from a broader scope across the world, or at least the states, a majority of our students do come locally from New Jersey and surrounding states. We are expensive. We have to help students cover those expenses. And there's much to be said about the choices that are made around that, which is not relevant for today. Within the College of Liberal Arts, the Department of Geosciences was established over a half a century ago as a traditional geology department and program. But along the way, my predecessors were monitoring what was outside Rider and trying to respond to student interests and markets, et cetera, and offering a more diverse set of options, but all within the earth sciences. So you can see our progression. And we've done this trying not to overextend our very small faculty of 6, and actually was 5 until I rejoined the faculty from the academic affairs. So we tried to do this efficiently and make sure that essentially all students are engaged in earth science learning, but are given a track or an concentration that they can pursue given their interests. We've also been welcoming education students. Of course, we want more high school earth science teachers, and so we've adapted some of our programs multiple times, and so you see the names of the most recent iterations of those programs. I'll tell you a little bit more about our total students in just a minute. In terms of outcomes, I would say that it is fair to say that Rider roughly matches or exceeds the overall university outcomes in terms of our retention, at least most recently, in terms of our graduation, and significantly different than the universities and better. And while it's hard to pin down an actual number for job and grad school placements, particularly since I've been chair only for a year and a half now, I think we're at par, if not better, than the overall university's accomplishments here. So here is the context for the case study. In 2015, really a convergence, or perhaps a perfect storm of choices and conflicts and decisions that were made. And much more could be said about that, but I won't. This is what the university decided to do. They needed to save money. They had some financial challenges, and even those financial challenges are still debated, but they made a choice to cancel 14 programs so that they could lay off 14 faculty members. The faculty were mostly tenure track, and in fact, many of them had been here for decades and extremely active people in campus community beyond their own programs. About 2 weeks later, people came to some terms and figured out how to not do what they posted 2 weeks earlier. Amongst those 14 programs were both our geosciences and marine sciences programs, again, so that 2 of our faculty could be laid off, both of whom were tenured. But thankfully, in about 2 weeks, the choices were changed. Now, of course, in those 2 weeks' time, it was a rather interesting time for all of us, and particularly within my department. There was only one other department targeted for 2 lines. So we did our best to get our feet back on the ground and respond and recover. And over the next several months, we continued that work, and we had some internal conversations about where did this come from? What does it mean? How could it be? What do we do? Along that time, though, the university continued to implement their first prioritization review. And there's a resource there if you're not familiar with this process about generally how this is done. And our provost happened to be a supporter of this particular approach. And from the review, what we started learning more about why possibly we were selected. And I think what you see here is that our 3 individuals of classic earth science related programs were probably misunderstood at levels that caused us some real trouble. It appeared that we were seen as offering very distinct programs that perhaps were in fact overextending the small faculty in our department. So it meant we needed to reconvene and re-communicate who we are, what we do, why we do it, and how successful we are. So one of the first things we did was try to communicate how it is that we can offer 3, or in this case now 4 with our BA program in environmental studies, how we can offer those with 6 faculty and without overextending ourselves. So this graphic was eventually created after multiple conversations to try and illustrate that we were intentionally trying not to overextend ourselves so that students could pick a specialty in earth sciences that had its own name and which mattered in terms of recruiting students, but that we weren't having to duplicate efforts or increase efforts to offer all these courses. So the point in this graphic is really to show that the yellow highlighted boxes show very few numbers of courses that are unique to the individual majors. So we were having students from different specialties take some of the similar courses. That seemed to make a difference, finally, in our efforts to communicate that we were at least not overextending ourselves. Of course, along the way, they're taking other science and math courses, but I've left those out here because this was all about our workload and our contribution and our faculty members. So now I'm going to summarize many of the other actions we've attempted and are still in the midst of implementing. I'm not going to do this chronologically. I've decided to organize it around the 3 sort of big questions that Stephen offered in his white paper that you'll find on the webpage for this webinar. And so pardon the fact that I might be jumping around a little bit. Of course, initially we regrouped, sat down and started talking about, again, how is it that we're here in this moment, in these circumstances. We started strategizing. In spring of 2016, it was known at that point that I would switch to be department chair in the fall of 2017. So, sorry, this was in spring of 2017. So at that point in the spring, I encouraged my colleagues to agree to participate in a traveling workshop that NAGT offers, and I'd highly recommend it. So my first month of department chair, we in fact retreat, and we took advantage of the full 2-day program and composed what I would say is a customized program that pieced together different options that enabled us to try and internally investigate why we were where we were and how we can move forward. I'd highly recommend this. We happen to have Dave Matty and Walt Robinson for our facilitators. And of course, once they got here and we started our work, they further customized the programming as our discussions unfolded. So I would recommend this. Through those efforts, we were able to start clarifying our mission, show that it is aligned with the university mission, and start to discover pieces here and there that could be better aligned with the mission and update our offerings. So we've, as a result of that work, we started updating our different curricula, updating specific courses and making sure they fit together better. We clarified our student learning outcomes and made it more pragmatic, I would say, to research those. And we started asking for help, essentially. And in particular, we started asking to be able to use the university's external research firm to look at our programs, how they fit into the demands outside the university, in particular employment, since most of our graduates are looking to leave with an undergraduate degree and get into the workforce, and start to see if there's another way we ought to combine our courses, or if there's another focus we can offer that is more update and addressing more of the current needs in the workforce primarily. So we also immediately after 2015's October events rallied our alumni, whom we have hundreds, and we asked them if they would be willing to communicate to the upper administration the importance of the programs that we offer and the success that they experienced and the importance of continuing these programs for the rest of the world. That allowed us to enhance our network with alumni and our connections with those alumni. So then we leveraged that to increase or add more, not start, but add more opportunities for alumni and local friends to mentor our students, to provide connections and information about internship opportunities and job opportunities. And we also started some of our own fundraising, particularly because we just happened to experience our 50th anniversary. So we leveraged that. We had a big event that was supported across campus. And we're now trying to raise funds for internship stipends and scholarships, et cetera. Because we are small, we decided it was time to take advantage of the fact that our student numbers are small, and we have been reviewing each individual student's progress once a year to talk about their successes and their challenges and their needs, and the degree to which each of us should know something that we can make sure those individual students are attended to as much as possible and as appropriate. We also started building more partnerships across the university. I'll say more about that as well. So I'm referencing them here. We also started promoting more of our students' academic successes and participated in more social media campaigns. I would say that of the 6 of us, half of us are social media users, but not frequent users. And so we found other ways to get the word out so we could market ourselves internally rather, and externally in ways that we're comfortable with, but are still more modern, if I could say it that way. And we've encouraged our students to get more involved in campus. In fact, some of the most recent students decided they just wanted a club. So they started Gems and Friends Club, which has been quite successful. And because we're small, and while the inquiries about our programs have been growing recently, because they are a relatively manageable number, we have increased our interactions with prospective students to make sure that they get what they need to know information-wise and make the best choice for themselves. And if it's Rider they want to come to, then great. But if they don't want to come here, then they should find the right place for themselves. The strategic partnerships that we've pursued internal are essentially our way of saying, listen, we cannot do all the things that are necessary to ensure we have enough students enrolled and to increase our enrollment. So essentially what we've done is said, instead of saying, can we, and having the conversations like, no, they said they can't, or they won't, or they've never done that before, we now have conversations that start with, how will we do these things with colleagues in admissions or in student support services, et cetera. And sometimes those conversations don't go very far, so we have to revisit them. But oftentimes, our colleagues in supporting units would say back to us, of course, we'll figure this out because we're all in this together. So we just shifted our questions from can we or why can't we to how will we. We've been pushing for more marketing support and Rider's marketing unit has been evolving and improving over time, but that was a real difficult part for us. And so we decided to take matters in our own hand, and we implemented some of our own marketing strategies beyond the university's marketing office. And fortunately, that worked out okay for us. We were called a rogue department for a little while, but it seemed to be okay. And we're now in the midst of a more formal effort with the university's external research firm to again investigate how our programs fit, how well they match demand, and whether there's some new adjustments or additions we can make that still don't overextend our small department, but enable us to meet more of the current needs in the workforce. Along this way, we continue to have a conversation about who we really are across units, across the upper administration, how it is that we do things efficiently, of course, acknowledging that there are always ways to improve it, and how we have been historically making adjustments that they've been asking for recently so that we can meet the demands of student interests and job markets, et cetera. And as a result of that, we were invited to help clarify the prioritization committee's criteria to evaluate programs, given that we had multiple related programs. And you'll see the outcome of that in a second. We've also participated in the revision of the College of Liberal Arts and Education, College of Liberal Arts and Sciences General Education Program, so that all of our introductory courses are available for any student. We save seats in those courses for freshmen so that we can recruit potentially new students in our programs, internal once they've arrived at Rider. It turns out we kind of lost our way collectively in terms of how to recruit students, so we've been implementing that. I would say that we have the most courses available to non-science students across the natural sciences for very practical reasons, but it seems to be that we are finally seen, or again seen, I should say, as a contributor outside of our own students' programs. We've increased transfer agreements with community colleges, and there's a little tick up in the number of students who've transferred from specifically those community colleges, and I'll show you that in a second. And we have been engaging students in all sorts of activities using the campus and surrounding areas as living labs. It just seemed like people lost track of that. So we had to redirect our efforts and communicate more about what was going on. So here's some data. Again, I'd say that we're very early in this process, and there are many variables that are variables that we cannot control or even address. But it does look like essentially one data point of data shows that maybe some of the things that we're doing, or perhaps all of the things that we're doing together, are making a difference. And I would use, while 2015 was the, so we could say, the tectonic event for us, I would say that 2018 is probably the best, most historical year to use to see if what we've been doing has had any impact. And you can see that our numbers of students that we are attracting to Rider who are admitted and who indicate they want to major in one of the GEMS majors has increased, particularly this year. So the outcome of that remains to be seen. The conversion rate, if I could call it that, the percentage of students who actually come to Rider and become our majors has increased. The number of students has increased. The number of transfers has increased a slight bit. And you can see in this small graph in the upper right that our retention rate has also increased. The 2019 number of admits is actually growing, but on small increments at this point. May 1st or so is probably everyone's deadline to know roughly where you are in terms of students committing. So we'll have a better sense of where we are at that point. But it is, it matches 2015's set of admitted students and is the largest number of students I've essentially had to interact with to try and help them make their decisions, which is quite an interesting task. Another thing that you can't really show in the data is that the number of students who come beyond the normal states that we attract to Rider has increased as well. So our external marketing efforts possibly may be the reason for that. That's a non-Rider tool that we're using that we hope high school teachers are seeing, and they can be from anywhere, basically. Now, while this is a good outcome, or so it appears. At the same time we were doing implementing these efforts, the university, of course, was doing their own efforts to ensure that our enrollments grow and that we become more financially sound, et cetera. And many of these could have potentially influenced students' decisions to come to Rider as well. Getting the word out better and more commonly, in greater numbers probably made a difference. Making sure that the public knows we're in better financial circumstances, I guess, and again, that's sort of debated. Adding new programs shows vitality. Renovations of rooms that we'd been using primarily for our instruction were in dire need for decades of renovation, and finally that happened this past summer. And of course, two very important things to students is the place they live and the food they eat have been addressed as well to some degree. And for the students we are interested in bringing in, elevating our sustainability profile could be a factor as well. We're trying to build green buildings, have more activity on classes that address sustainability issues, et cetera. While this probably doesn't influence student choices, just so you know, the university is attempting to recover from those 2015 events through a variety of efforts, not the least of which was settling on a new contract, and that was ripe with controversy and dissatisfaction, et cetera, except we are able to move beyond it, and the university administration is beginning to add back some of the many cuts that came about from that new contract. So one of the outcomes from all this work is that the academic affairs staff we interact with mostly do seem to notice that we've made this concerted effort and appear to recognize us for that work. So here's a quote from our dean, just so my claims that we are making progress are backed up by our supporting administration. And then the person, and I should say that this comment that says, while there remains much work to be done, my question about, can you say more about this was, well, increase enrollments, hire new faculty, and continue to do what you're doing, basically, which he then followed with, but that's true for all departments. And the person who leads our efforts for prioritization, which we understand will take place periodically, did hear our feedback about whether we should be evaluating our individual programs, which sounds like a small thing, but was a big deal for us. And finally, it appears that we are understood that while we are offering specialized concentrations for our students, they are not disparate programs. They are related to each other, and they're designed to be curricularly efficient so that we can offer them without overextending ourselves. It turns out that the evaluation to determine whether programs are evaluated differently or separately or combined was changed because of our feedback and, frankly, our pushback about all of this. So I guess the big takeaways for me would be to say, if you find yourself in one of these circumstances, is that there isn't one solution, and probably it will be a combination of solutions, and you may not know which specifically made a difference. But for sure, make sure you are well understood, you're visible, you're active, you're proactive, and you're innovative. And unless you're told otherwise, assume everyone else here who supports the academic endeavor are there to help. You might have to help them figure out how to do that, but do it and don't back down. And if you are told otherwise, then just take matters into your own hands, which is essentially one of the first things we said in our internal regrouping after our tectonic event. And that was, listen, if people are saying no or we can't help you, then we just need to take matters into our own hands and get some of this done. And as we started, people said, yes, we will help. We just had to figure out how. And that's it.
Great. Thank you very much, Kathy. That's really an inspiring story of how you've been able to take, as you call it, a tectonic event and become better as a result of it. One of the questions, and I'll kind of paraphrase that, were other programs that were targeted at the time, did they have the same sort of road to recovery and improvement? And if you know about that, and if so, did they employ similar strategies to the ones that you've described just now for the GEMS program?
I have to say that it's been difficult to know what's going on elsewhere. We had to take matters into our own hands and do what we needed to do. To be honest with you, I don't know. I do know from the dean's office that when they talk with chairs from some of those other programs, they say to them, listen, there is some light at the end of the tunnel, and go talk to GEMS and see if they can, you can take advantage of some of their ideas. So I have to say, I don't know. I would prefer that the leadership here, because it's difficult to do individually, that the leadership group those programs together and engage them in a combined effort. That is not happening at this point.
Okay. And then another question for you, Kathy. Within your your options for your students, have all of them? You showed nice growth. Are all of them continuing to or growing in the same way, or how's that working out within the department?
They are all growing. Geosciences, the traditional approach, and probably because of where we're located, has been the lowest numbers recently. And this past year, we got the biggest class we've seen in a very long time. And that's the 5 students that I'm talking about is a big deal for us. Environmental science has always been, since its inception, which was a very good move, it turns out, the biggest draw for our students. We designed that program so it was chemistry heavy and geoscience heavy, so that we helped our students be prepared for the kinds of jobs they say they wanted, which is environmental consulting and government agencies and that sort of thing. With the right enough, maybe not all the right, but enough geoscience background, which is what environmental consultants tell us they need, without it being a geoscience aimed program. We had to back off a little bit on the chemistry. At the time we proposed it, University of Pennsylvania was an external reviewer, and they said, hey, why don't you do this as a master's program too? Why not? And the university was not an advocate for graduate programs at the time, so we didn't. But it was an indicator that we were creating a good program that would help our students succeed. Marine sciences has been in the middle there. They're close to the shore. Generally, students are interested in more marine biology. We provide a broad spectrum of marine sciences, also with the geoscience part to it. So all the numbers have increased, but they've increased differently.
Great. Stephen, do you want to offer any comments on the situation that Kathy described?
Yeah, I'm seeing numerous parallels between the proactive adaptation and how to respond to a crisis that I suggested. One is they really dug into their data, and they used their data to address the return on investment issue, which really is what that program restructuring and optimization is all about. If you drill down in that publication, what you find is they're asking questions about FTE effort and how much it costs, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm really delighted to have heard what they did, because it fits entirely in what I'm suggesting. And yeah, so it's great.
Okay, good. And if others have questions or comments, please type them into the chat function. I also wanted to just highlight a little bit, Kathy mentioned the role of 2017, that they had a traveling workshop, or maybe they're better described as visiting workshops, organized through the National Association of Geoscience Teachers. And certainly, as I was reading the comments of people applying, there were a number of you who I thought, yeah, you probably would benefit from this workshop, which Stephen is a facilitator for the traveling workshops, as am I, and about 3 other faculty members. We come in and help. We don't tell you what to do, but it's a structured program of helping you to realize what you have and to think through how do you move forward and actually end up with an action plan for your program or department. Kathy, did you want to comment anything else about the role of the traveling workshop in your process?
Yeah, I think, we had some issues to address, And what Dave and Walt were able to do is bring this, sort of the outside new perspective and ask questions like, well, why is that way? Or have you thought about this? It was actually from that workshop that we said, oh yeah, no, geoscience programs usually do recruit from internal student populations, so we need them to get into our classes earlier than they were. And our system of registering new students in our college doesn't allow for that. So we had to get that conversation about why are we doing it this way? I know it's more efficient, but A, the students aren't as happy, and B, for programs that need students to discover the disciplines, they need to do that early enough for that. So it was sort of eye-opening, asking, I'll call it, they're not naive questions, but sort of because they don't know our context, they're not naive questions in that way, like, why? Just because it's done that way, is that the right thing to do? And then secondly, they were able to create a safe environment for us to have some, interesting, sometimes difficult conversations about what we really do need to do that we're not doing. So, and they completely adapted to our needs as the discussions played out.
Okay, great. Let me ask you to take one more question, and maybe this is one to start with Stephen, and then Mitchell's going to give us just some context and next steps in terms of the webinars here. So the question being, what do you consider the most important components in return on investments for geoscience programs? And Stephen, maybe you could address that also from the perspective of an administrator who's looking at the return on investment question.
Yeah, you look at the faculty FTEs and you look at the indirect costs coming in. My perspective is from a fairly large public state-funded university, although state-funded I use cautiously. So, the point is that the numbers are bigger than Ryder, but nonetheless, I think Kathy did a great job of showing how they marshaled their numbers. And so, how are the faculty efforts allocated? How many other majors contribute or use the courses that your faculty create and offer? What is the integration across campus? Specifically, then there's also the bottom line. How much tuition do your students bring in? Which is always problematic and always difficult to assess because of many factors that drive tuition. But nonetheless, it's an important number for you to be aware of. And it's also important to internally calculate what you think the cost of your program is for a student. One of the things that I thought that was really terrific about Kathy's approach is the individual advising that they do with the students, and that they sit them down and they say, okay, where are you in your career? What do you want to be doing, and how can we help you? At big institutions, often that is lost. It's not something that happens on a face-to-face, one-to-one basis. And that, in turn, can actually improve your retention numbers, which is an important factor to present. You saw all the data, essentially, that you need to collect. It's a non-trivial effort. It's you've got to be organized and transparent about collecting the data.
And I'll just add that for Ryder has dealt with this ROI, return on investment, using the prioritization approach that Dickinson outlines in his book. And it really comes down to, does it cost more to run your program than Ryder's bringing in for the number of students, the number of faculty, and other expenses? And if you break even, that's better. If you're essentially cost less than the money that's brought in.
That's exactly right.
Okay. Well, thank you both, and I'll thank you a little more formally. But let's let Mitchell just talk about where you can get information and just follow up from this webinar.
So we offer a number of other opportunities to interact with Integrate and AESS. And oops, I just let me back up my slide here. And in AGT, we have a couple webinars coming up. One on the 26th, core competencies for sustainability education programs. And on the 29th, teaching nanoscience in the earth and environmental sciences. As has been mentioned a couple times, we'd invite everyone to consider their department or program or course for NHET's Traveling Workshops program. Fall and early winter workshop application deadline is June 15th. You can join us at the 2019 AESS Sustainable Futures Conference, which is in late June, or consider joining us at the 2019 Earth Educators Rendezvous in mid-July. If you'd like to continue today's discussion, we have a community discussion board, which I will link to in the chat box in a moment. And as always, we appreciate your feedback, and I'll link to webinar evaluation in the chat box as well. And we'd appreciate it if you could take a few minutes to fill that out. So thank you, Stephen. Thank you, Kathy. Thank you, David. Thank you everyone for attending, and we hope to see you at one of these future events.
Thanks for your interest.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks a lot for the opportunity.
And if people do have additional questions or comments, we'll stay on for a couple minutes in the chat function, and we can exchange that way. And then all of us are available for individual consultation as well. Great job. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.